Greetings, citizens! Justiguy has arrived. If you've been following the ongoing story of Steam's stay night at all, then you might have heard that Steam has seemingly reversed their sudden, bizarre decision to remove multiple visual novels from their storefront. After the internet storm that was raised in response to that decision, it seems like Valve has learned their lesson and all's well that ends well, right? Victory! Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say so. Let's actually look at what it is that Valve said they'd be doing. Specifically, the message that the VN developers and publishers in question received wasn't, hey, our bad, or anything even on those lines. It was more like, we're gonna be re-reviewing those games and hey, that other deadline is off. Now, there are two ways to look at this message. One is that this is Valve's way of both saving face and preventing this from happening in the future. By phrasing things this way, they can say the following. First, that they totally aren't at fault and are just doing their job and all that good, important stuff that big, reliable companies do, and see how you can rely on them to take care of things. And second, and with some less sarcasm here, that if the issue gets raised again, they can say, yeah, okay, but we already checked these games out and we decided they're cool, so can you crazy people not bother us about them anymore, please? And in that respect, yeah, cool, I'm down for that. However, keep in mind that this explanation is one we get not from actually reading what Valve said, but from reading between the lines of what they said. So let's actually look at what they said instead. Because if we take it for what it is, if we look at that as an honest statement, then I'm not sure if we can consider the supposed reversal of their prior decision a victory, or if we can even call it a reversal at all. Because here's the thing, all of these games, in some form or another, had already been reviewed by Valve to get on Steam in the first place. PewDiePie was nominated for the Steam Awards last year, and at least some of the other games were released after Greenlight was phased out, meaning Valve should have been the only ones involved with getting those games onto Steam at all. So what is this re-reviewing referring to? The original reviews these games got when they were first put onto the store? The more recent ones that got them these notices in the first place? Either scenario suggests that the initial review that got them there wasn't good enough. It wasn't done well enough, it wasn't thorough enough, or it wasn't something enough. In other words, no matter which way you slice it, Valve screwed up, and it seems like they're trying to dodge responsibility. Something that's all the worse when you consider they're now putting the livelihoods and security of the developers in question in jeopardy without seemingly any research into what they're doing. How did they think these games even got onto Steam in the first place? You might find it interesting to notice how, throughout all of this, I don't think I've heard any mention of a change in how games are going to be put onto Steam when that would be the thing to tackle, wouldn't it? If, and this is a huge if, these games truly don't belong on Steam, Valve is responsible for that, and all they're saying with them re-reviewing the games is that they're going to look them over again. With that, they can let the initial internet outrage pass over them as people feel like they won the battle. Then they may well go ahead and still reject some or even all of the games they're re-reviewing once the whole wave is passed over them. I'm going to assume they're not going to, because that would just be bad PR, but who knows. No matter what they decide, the fact that it's happened at all shows that Steam is not a secure place to have your games. For whatever reason, Valve can just up and decide a game, a developer, whatever, it just doesn't fit their rules anymore, their standards, and say, hey, you know what? You've got this much time, if any time at all, and you're gone if you don't do what we say. Which seems to defeat the entire point of how games are now supposed to be manually reviewed by them, you know? This is not something that should scare only visual novel developers, indie developers, developers of platformers, violent games, sexual games, whatever. That is a precedent that you do not want to see set anywhere on anything. If you make or enjoy games in any capacity whatsoever, you should not be okay with what Valve did or even how they're handling the aftermath. Those games got onto the store, and if they shouldn't have been there, then they need to completely overhaul Steam, not try to sweep them out the back door and continue on as usual. If games with sexual content aren't welcome on Steam, why did Steam offer options to filter that very thing out in a user's settings? Isn't the very existence of such a setting implying that those games are going to be a part of Steam, and if you don't want to see them, pick this option and you don't have to see them? If games suitable for mature audiences aren't welcome on Steam, why does Steam forbid players under 13 from making accounts, and on top of that, make players of any age enter their date of birth whenever they want to look at games with mature content? Clearly, the system is designed with these safeguards. It's designed with the implications that say, yes, this store does sell and provide these things, and Here is how we're going to make it so users aren't exposed to or can avoid exposure to all of the things they don't want to see. And going off of what I said in my previous video on this topic, with all of this in place, quite frankly, if someone got a hold of such a game, why would it be Valve's fault? How is it their responsibility any more than if a kid walks into a bookstore and gets a raunchy book? The bookstore has done all they can, you know? They've put it separated, they've probably wrapped it in plastic, I don't know, but if the kid lies, if the kid dresses the part, maybe grew out a beard, I don't know, if they've got a fake ID, or, you know, if someone else buys it for the kid, then it happens. But the store, be it the bookstore or Steam, was doing what it does as a store, providing the products for customers who are supposed to be able to buy them, you know, responsibly, doing the right thing, not anything wrong, all that stuff. And because Steam is a store, it also shouldn't be passing arbitrary judgments on what games are and aren't allowed in the store as they feel like. Yes, they absolutely can set rules and decide what is and isn't allowed in the store. But when they set those rules, they can't up and change them however and whenever they like. If mature content is not allowed on Steam, exceptions for AAA games can't be made. If sexual content is not allowed on Steam, it should all have to go, not just with the games that are small indie titles or the ones with anime art style. To that end, if Valve doesn't like the anime aesthetic, as seems to be the case with a lot of people, it needs to own up to that and purge all of it from the store, not just pick and choose which things they can get rid of while still making money from that demographic. I don't know about you, but that kind of feels dishonest to me. Long story short, I don't think you can call this a victory because Valve's message doesn't suggest any real change on their part, and the reality is that what happened is really something that only happened because of Valve. If Valve doesn't want certain games, cool, but be upfront about it and enforce it. And more than that, give notice and proper, clear explanations to the developers of what's wrong with their games. Give them warning and the ability to fix up their games if need be. As it stands, like I said before, all they're really saying is that they're going to look over these specific games again. I imagine they probably won't do anything about them given the negative press they got, but who's to say this won't happen again? What's actually stopping it? Who's to say that maybe going forward, games are going to be held to different standards than games that are sitting on the store all fine and dandy right now? Because even that is still pretty hypocritical and I'd say unfair. Maybe there's no way to know, as all of this is the sort of thing that only folks actually working at Valve could ever possibly know, but as someone who has been hoping to one day maybe release something onto Steam myself, this whole thing has been troubling to watch unfold, and I don't feel like we're truly out of the woods yet. Whatever does happen in the future, even if nothing at all, I feel like one thing that really does need to be addressed is the very obvious double standard I talked about in my last video. It's been talked about time and time again, but it really can't be stated enough that the acceptance of violence and gore and simultaneous disdain for nudity and sex, and on top of that, the acceptance of those things when the graphics are more and more real looking, yet the bizarre disconnect when they're not, these are all things that should just not be. More than that, I think people just need to realize that there's nothing actually making them play games that they don't like or don't want to play. I know it's incredibly easy to vilify people you don't agree with these days. I can understand that. At the same time, having been observing these sorts of confrontations escalating more and more for the past few years, it really does seem like the solution, to me at least, is as simple as it sounds. If you don't want to watch or read or play something, if you don't like it, if you disagree with its message, if you don't approve of the art direction, if you think there's too much gore or sexualization, then just don't. I hate to get preachy here, but if you have the time and ability to stop, sit down, and take in some kind of entertainment, and then, on top of that, find reason to stop it from being sold and all that, well, while I don't agree with the last part, that's actually pretty great. That you have the ability and time to do all of that, that is. Not necessarily that you are doing that, but not everyone can say they can do those things. For a lot of people, just being able to get to the point where you can chill out after a long day can be a lot, so don't take that for granted. Of course, understandably, this might be precisely why some people out there can be so passionate in the first place. I can totally understand how hard it might feel to get home from a rough day only for it to feel like there isn't anything out there for you to use to unwind, or worse, for everything that supposedly is out there for you to actually make you feel worse. That is a perfectly valid thing to feel. If you feel like there's nothing out there for you when you do stop to sit down and take in something, if you hate everything out there, if you think everything out there is vile, morally reprehensible, whatever, well, That's okay. You don't need to waste a single second of your time on any of it. But you shouldn't think it's okay to go after the creators of those things or even those things themselves. It's all just fiction, fantasy, none of it's real, it's not hurting anyone. You don't need to involve it in your life or take it away from the lives of the people who do enjoy it. By all means, push for the things you want to exist, to enjoy, to exist, so you can enjoy them. I'd love to see it come to fruition. I would. And I'll say it again and again, but variety is never, ever a bad thing. What is a bad thing, however, is wanting to shut down creativity, shut down creative works, no matter how trashy or stupid or smutty or shameless or even outright vile they may seem. So, if you should ever find yourself in the position of, well, whoever it was that kicked off Steam Stay Night here, remember that you could be using that energy and time to be promoting, making, or just helping out the things you would enjoy instead of taking down and lashing out at the things you clearly don't. But then again, what do I know? I am just a guy, after all. And this is Farewell.